Math 2, Unit 12, Section 5B. So we're doing the second half of Lesson 5. When you are factoring and finding solutions, you first need to make sure that everything is set equal to 0. So prior to factoring, it has to be set equal to 0. So starting here on the left side, what is my issue? Good, we need to move the negative 49, so we'll add 49 to both sides. Okay, these cancel. I get x squared plus 14x plus 49 equals 0. So now I can factor. Can I do the shortcut?
Yes.
How do you know? There isn't a coefficient in front of our first term, our squared term. Good. So what numbers will multiply to be 49? 7 and 7. And both of those numbers will need to be? Very good. So they'll multiply to make a positive 49, and they will add to make our 14. Okay? So from this point now, we make our two parentheses, and what will go in the first parenthesis? So we always split up our squared term, correct? And so x goes in the front of each of the parentheses, and then plus 7 will end up going at the end, and that equals 0. When we set those equal to 0, what does x end up equaling? Negative 7. Do you think I need to write it twice? No. Okay, negative 7 is the same as negative 7. So if you get two answers that are the same, you only need to write it one time. Okay? That's it. That's your answer. Those are the solutions. If you take x plus 7 and set it equal to 0, you subtract 7 to both sides, so x equals negative 7. And we talked about how whatever's in parentheses, the answer will end up being the opposite. Okay? All right. So number 5 over here, is this set equal to 0? No. So we're going to subtract 5c to both sides. This cancels. We have c squared minus 5c equals 0. Now this does not have 3 terms. If you don't have 3 terms, you want to check first, is there a GCF? Is there one? Good, C. So we can take out a C, and when I divide each of these terms by C, what am I left with? Very good. And you always check if you can factor things further. In this case, I am not able to. And so my first factor here, what will that answer be? Just C equals 0. And then on this one, when I set C minus 5 equal to 0, I will get C equals what? Positive 5. So those are my answers. C equals 0 and 5. Questions before I move on? Yes? Because that was a GCF. You always check if there's a GCF, a greatest common factor. So each of those terms have a C in common. So you can take a C out in front. Sometimes it's like a number that they might have in common, but you always check for that first. Okay? And then once the whole problem is factored, so the red is the factored problem, C and C minus 5, you set each of the factors equal to 0. So my first factor is just C. So you get 1 C equals 0. Okay? Any other questions? Okay, next one, number 6. What do I need to do here first? Good. Add 10 to the other side. So we have 3h squared plus 17h plus 10 equals 0. Can I do the shortcut on this problem? No. Why not? Coefficient in front. Good. So we're going to go 3 times 10, which makes 30. So 30 is my multiplication number. Okay, but everything else still stays the same. So my adding number is still 17. So what numbers will multiply to be 30 and add to be 17? Very good. 2 and 15 work. And what signs will both of those have? Good. So both of those are positives. Multiply to be positive. You add them, they will be positive 17. So now how do I rewrite this? Perfect. So everything stayed the same in the problem. Okay, we keep our 3 here, we keep our 10 here, we just change our 17H to be the breakdown of the 2 factors. Okay, now what? Group them. Yes. Did you have a question, Kathleen, or no?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, what's the GCF of the first group? And we're left with 3H plus 2. Good. What's the GCF of the second group? 5. And we divide by 5 to both of those, and we're left with? Good. And these parentheses always need to? Otherwise, you? Very good. Okay, so this ends up factoring, and what does it become? 3H plus 2 and H plus 5. Does it matter which order I write the parentheses in? No. Okay, so if you need to, you can write this out and set each of them equal to 0. Okay, if you don't have to, I'm okay with you doing this part in your head. Okay, so we get H equals, the opposite of positive 2 would make it a negative 2, and then you would divide by 3. Here, this would make the opposite of 5, which would make negative 5. So those are my 2 answers. H equals negative 2/3 and negative 5. Questions? Okay, next here we're going to solve from vertex form. So do you guys remember what we did with this one? Okay, we want to get the square by itself. Very good. Now the only difference is that we are going to put a 0 in for f of x. Okay, so all we're going to do is change this to be 0 equals 2 parentheses x plus 1 squared minus 4. And what would I do first to get the square by itself? Very good. Add 4 to both sides. Okay, so we get 4 equals 2 parentheses x plus 1 squared. What's next? Good. Divide by 2 to both sides. So these cancel. We get 2 equals x plus 1 squared. Now what? Take the square root of both sides. Okay, when I do that, what happens when I take a square root? It's going to be plus or minus, and then in this case, root 2. So a lot of you on your quizzes forgot to put the plus or minus, which ended up getting your answer incorrect. Okay, so it's always plus or minus. Be careful. Okay, what's next? Subtract 1. Because this, and I get x equals negative 1 plus or minus root 2. And I don't need to write this as 2 equations because I wouldn't be able to simplify negative 1 and root 2. Okay, you can't add a regular number with a root number. Okay, questions? All right, you guys tried this one on your own. Get the square by itself and let's see if you can solve it. So start by plugging in 0 for f of x. So 0 equals x minus 2 squared minus 9, and then go through and solve it. Okay, remember, if you can simplify your root, then you need to get the 2 answers. Okay, are we ready? Okay, what would I do first? Good, add 9 to both sides. Okay, we do that, we get 9 equals x minus 2 squared. What's next? Very good. What is the square root of 9?
3.
Incorrect.
Plus 9.
There you go, plus or minus 3 equals x minus 2. Okay, what will I do now to get the x by itself? Good, add 2 to both sides. So when I write this out, I have x equals 2 plus or minus 3. Can that be simplified?
Yes.
Yeah, so we have one problem that is 2 plus 3, which is 5, and one is 2 minus 3, which is negative 1. Okay, and so my answers are x equals 5 and negative 1. How many of you got that correct? Nice. How many of you forgot plus or minus and only got one answer? Some of you. Okay, so be careful, please. Okay. All right. Okay, next one, it says use this function right here. F of x equals x squared minus 4x minus 5. And what are the zeros of the function? Okay, that's exactly what we're finding right now. And you're going to see this on your test where they're going to say, what are the zeros? The zeros are when you're going to solve for x. You're finding your x-intercepts. Okay, so what will I do in order to find my zeros? You're going to set this equal to 0. Okay, and so we plug in 0 for f of x. So we're going to go 0 equals x squared minus 4x minus 5. And on this one, we're going to have to factor, right? Anytime we have a squared term, the way to solve this is by factoring. Okay, so what multiplies to be negative 5 and what adds to be negative 4? Good, 5 and 1. And then which one will be negative? A negative 5 and a positive 1. Good. So we make our parentheses. What goes in the front of each of these parentheses? X is correct. And then we're going to have one will be minus 5 and the other will be plus 1. Good. And we set those equal to 0, and what answers do I get? What are my zeros? When I set these equal to 0, what does it equal?
5 and negative 1.
Good. X equals 5 and x equals negative 1. So my zeros are that x equals 5 and negative 1. Okay, on part B it says, what is the graph of the function? Draw the axis of symmetry. Okay, so we're going to have to draw our, actually I did not do that very good. Let's change this, just kidding. Okay, so my axis is going to be here. I want to make it so that I have at least enough room to draw the 5. So you have your coordinate plane. You need to draw your x and y axis. I have one answer here that's 5. So that means I'm going to go right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Make a point. Okay, and then I'm going to have another point at negative 1. So there's a point right there. Now it says to draw the axis of symmetry. Where would the axis of symmetry be? 2 is correct. How do we know? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 numbers, right? Remember this from yesterday? And so in the middle would be 1, 2, 3, and that is at x equals 2. And then how would this curve? Would it curve going up or curve going down? Why? How do you know? There isn't a negative number in front of our squared term. The a value is positive. A value tells you the direction. Okay? So it looks like this. Do we have any questions? Okay, So we're going to turn the page, and I'm going to have you guys try this next one on your own. Okay, so 9A and B go together. You want to find the zeros, and then you're going to graph it. Okay, and find your axis of symmetry. And actually on this one, I want us to find the exact vertex too. I might help you with that. So find your zeros, find your axis of symmetry. Wait to draw your curve. Okay, you should be doing this one on your own. You can do it.
Thank you.
She's like, it's unity. But like, me and her. Well, they used to be.
Okay, give me a thumbs up if you are done. If you need more time, I'll wait for a minute. We're mostly good. You want more time? Okay, one more minute. Okay, if you're done, I want you to think about how you could find the exact point for the vertex. Okay, are we good now? Okay, so the first thing you should have done is set this equal to 0, and you got x squared plus 2x minus 8. Okay, what did you end up getting for your parentheses? Tell me what to write in the parentheses. X minus 2 and x plus 4 are correct. Do we understand how we got those numbers?
No.
This is our multiplication number. This is our adding number. What numbers multiply to be negative 8? You have 1 and 8 and 2 and 4. Out of those numbers, how can you make them add to be a positive 2? And that is by making this a positive 4 and a negative 2. When you multiply them, they make a negative 8. When you add them together, they make a positive 2. Okay? So then these values are what goes at the end of each of the parentheses. You can always do it the long way, though, by doing your grouping and breaking down your middle adding term. Okay, when you set these equal to 0, what does x equal? Positive 2 and, so we go through here and plot these. So positive 2 makes a point. Negative 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 makes a point. Where is the axis of symmetry? Okay, good. Negative 1 is correct. So this is saying that x equals negative 1. How could I find my vertex? Did anybody figure out what we could do? your vertex with the axis of symmetry, your vertex, the x value of your vertex is always the axis of symmetry, and vice versa. So your vertex is -1 something. Okay? So how could you figure out the value of y when x is -1? Exactly. Plug it into the equation. So what you would do is you just change f of x to y, and so we would write y equals -1 squared plus 2 times -1 minus 8. And then we'd solve. -1 squared is 1. 2 times -1 is -2, and then you have minus 8. 1 minus 2 is -1, minus 8 equals, so my vertex is at -9. And you guys will have a question just like this on your test. So left 1 down, you could just make a point down there for 9. And there's your problem. Okay, any questions? Okay, so we just have 2 more problems for factoring. This first one should be pretty easy, I'm hoping. -10 is your adding, and 24 is your multiplying. Good. So anybody know what numbers will end up working? Very good. -6 and -4. How will I end up writing that? Nope. Good. Z minus 6 and...
Z minus 4.
Yeah, I'm like, you said that. Okay. Z minus 6 and Z minus 4. So when I set those equal to 0, what do I get? Good. Z equals 6 and Z equals 4. So those are my answers. 6 and 4. Okay. What is the problem with the second example? It's not set equal to 0. So what will I do? Combine like terms and do that by like moving them from side to side, right? And so you always want x squared, you always want that to be positive. And so since it's positive right now, that means everything on this right side I'm going to move to the left, okay? So that means I'm going to add 9x. Are you guys okay with subtracting 4 at the same time?
Yeah,
If you're not, you don't have to, but I'm just lining up my like terms. The object is to cancel out everything on the right side, so everything's on one side and it's set equal to 0. I add down, I get x squared. What's -4 plus 9? Positive 5. We subtract sign of the bigger numbers. When you have a -2 and a -4, what do? Good, you add them, it stays negative, equals 0. Okay, so on this one, 5 is my adding, -6 is my multiplying. If you forget, I would keep writing that down every time until you remember it. So what numbers multiply to be 6? 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. Which one can I multiply and make it a -6 but add to be a positive 5? Very good. A -1 and a positive 6. Okay, and so I can use my shortcut on this. How do I know I can use my shortcut? Good. There isn't an a value there, or the a value is 1. And so we get x minus 6, or sorry, x minus 1 and x plus 6. When I set those equal to 0, what does x equal? Positive 1 and -6. Okay, any questions you want to ask? Yes, Christian.
So when you set it to 0, you basically just like flip the
Sign.
sign.
And you could actually go through. At the beginning, we actually did set it equal to 0 and solved. And we just found that, oh, it's always going to be the opposite sign. So I think I can like do that in my head instead of writing it out.
Oh, okay.
Okay? All right, any other questions?